Welcome to another special episode of Jews on Film. My name is Harry Adensasser. I'm your Jewish film podcaster, and joining me as always is Daniel Zana.
Hey, Harry, thanks so much. My name is Daniel Zahn. I'm a video editor, documentary filmmaker, and I'm really excited today. Our guest today is an Emmy-nominated writer and director whose previous film, Love, Gilda, was about the late comedian Gilda Radner, and her latest documentary, Shari Lamb Chop, is now playing the 30th annual Seattle Jewish Film Festival. The midday matinee is on March 28th at 1 p.m. at the Strom Jewish Community Center. Lisa D'Appolito, welcome to Jews on Film.
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Harry. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here to discuss your film that is showing at the Strom Jewish Community Center. But why don't you start out by just telling folks a little bit about what the documentary is about?
Well, the documentary is about Shari Lewis, who is, I have to say, the best ventriloquist of all time. She had a big show in the late 50s, early 60s, and then a show again in the 90s. And she has a lovely sidekick named Lambchop, which is this beautiful little puppet. And it's sort of Shari's journey from being the daughter of the official magician of New York City to having her own show, to reinventing herself, to coming back. And it's sort of the journey of Shari and her, lamb chop also. She goes along with the trip.
Lambchop is definitely a co-star. I would almost call her a co-lead. I think she brings a lot of spice to all the procedures.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially after like it sounds like a one martini will do lamb chop in towards the end. You see her a little bit tipsy, which is always fun to see. I think I was texting Harry about it. I wanted to ask you just, what it was like to put this film together because I find myself after watching these documentaries where you are introduced to someone and they're so powerful and transcendent and they're just like forces of nature in terms of like how huge they were in the culture at the time. And then by the end, they're gone. And it's like so like I feel so sad and so melancholy a little bit at the end because I felt that way about the Gary Shandling documentary where I was like, he seemed like such a great guy and he's gone. And I just like, I don't know. What was it like for you as someone who was, gathering all these testimonials and putting this story together of somebody for probably, I would imagine, quite a good deal of time? How was it for you kind of telling Sherry's story in that regard?
I think it started from the beginning, the automatic connection to Shari and Lamb Chop. I just felt like there was something so lovable and loved of them. So I was never really sad because I was so happy to go on the journey with them. So I don't know if
Right.
that makes sense, but to be around Sherry and puppets was pretty fun, and the people that we interviewed, the ventriloquist and David Copperfield, the magician. So it was a fun project, So I think it's like I feel sad when I watch the movie because obviously, Sherry's not with us anymore.
Right, right.
It makes me feel good. That just kind of was my mission was to make people aware of Sherry and to care about her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we spoke about it off mic a little bit, but Daniel was talking about how he was familiar with her from, that 90s era iteration of her show,
sure.
but didn't know her before. And I'll admit to not knowing much about her at all, before seeing this film. And I thought it was a remarkable experience just getting to see her, through all ages, hearing her family talk about her, and of course the people who admired her. And, there was something spectacular and really kind of brought to life about this experience. And honestly, what's so funny is that even the way, Daniel was describing it and now you are, the last time I had an experience like this was when I saw the Love Gilda documentary.
Oh,
And
no way.
I did not realize until afterwards that that was also your film. And I think you have a real talent for that. So it was a pleasure to watch.
Oh, thank you. That was the oh, thank you. That's really, really nice because then I met my goal because my goal was to make people love Sherry as much as I loved them or love Gilda as much as I loved her.
No question. So I wanted to ask you another question. This being the Jews on Film podcast, we always try to parse out the kind of Jewish connection to the movies that we watch. And there are certainly some instances of Shari's Jewishness coming to light. I mean, my personal favorite was when Sarah Sherman popped up, and that was instantly, I was like, oh, Sarah Sherman loves her? Like, she's my favorite. But she talks about there kind of being that Hanukkah special, and she mentions that she had never seen that before, on children's television, and that was really, remarkable. So I wanted to ask you, having done all the research, what can you say about, Shari's level of connection to her Jewishness as a performer?
I think Sherry was really, really proud to be Jewish. I think, it came at a time in her era that you couldn't be Sherry Horowitz. You
Right.
had to be Sherry Lewis. So it
Hmm.
was like
Right.
a different era and time. So I think when she did her Hanukkah specials, a Hanukkah, and Passover special, I think that was a big statement for her, like a big risk, maybe even in the 90s, to go out and do something like that. So it was really her culture and her family. She has a huge family. Like
Yeah.
there's like, I don't know, 100 cousins. There's so many relatives. And so
Sounds like a Jewish family.
yeah, so family and Jewish humor. I mean, Sherry's her culture, her humor is, I think, her culture. Like the humor is so, like, I'm a New Yorker, so and my godmother's Jewish, and my best friend, I grew up with everyone Jewish, so I feel like I'm an honorary
Sure.
Jewish
No
person because
question.
I'm
100%.
Italian.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just love that about her, and I think a lot of the audio, like, so I don't know if you can tell, but the audio is from all different places. They're from interviews.
Hmm.
And one is from she did a audio interview for the Dorad Center, the New York Public Library, about her
Cool.
Jewish culture. So there's some
Oh,
things that came in from there. So that's like really interesting. If you ever wanted to hear more about it, you can I think you have to go to the library and listen to it, but you get a good sense because her grandfather was a rabbi.
and her dad like was one of the founding teachers of YU I saw online, which is pretty. Isn't that your alma mater, Harry? Or no?
It's
No,
not,
you're not.
but I'm
Okay,
very
okay.
fond of it. It's my dad's. It is
Your
my
dad's
dad's.
alma mater. That's what I
Family
meant. Yeah, yeah.
connection, right? While we're talking about
Sure, sure, sure.
family Jewishness. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, he was a math professor there.
And also, like you said, like the Magician of New York. That's like quite a double act, you know?
I was just wondering, do you know if that's an active title, if there's someone who's holding that currently, the official magician of New York?
No, there's no active title, but I think that's what sold me a little bit on doing the film is like I like saw her father's obituary, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, official magician of New York City. Like I grew up here. I never heard of that. So
Right.
that was one of the things that and obviously he was a great character. He could have his own movie in itself.
I mean, she has a real knack, obviously, for doing television so many years and things like that. Like at the beginning, when she's like telling her family story, she's such a good storyteller that she's able to like really jazz it up and kind of like accentuate all the cool stuff. And then all the B-roll that you found of like, all that old footage of the magicians and just telling that story of that time of a bygone era, as it were, really well done. I want to segue into like sort of another question as we are in 2025. And in the film, you mentioned that there's a time in Sherry's career at the beginning where she's doing this show and she's really knocking it out of the park. She's getting all these views. She's doing it like 5, 6 days a week, something like that. And then kids' cartoons come around, and it's the '60s, and things transition. And do you sort of see any kind of similarities nowadays with kids performers and other things like that, where there's other stuff going on with their attention for like YouTube and iPads and all sorts of other distractions? Do you find that there's like some difficulties nowadays?
Everybody that I know grew up with television. And now it's not television. Children have a choice. YouTube, they have millions of
Yeah.
choices. So, and back in the Sherry day, there was only a couple stations. So you'd be
Right.
waiting for that show to come, and that person would be like in your living room. So was a totally different time. Those some shows like Sesame Street just keep going.
Right.
You don't really know the current shows. But what's interesting is what the jokes and things Sherry did in the 60s, she did in the 90s, and they
Hmm.
probably still work today.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say, like, yeah, I'm sure it's a really changing time for media and how you get, what you watch, how you find out what you watch. You just don't turn on the television anymore and just sit there and be like,
Right.
oh, this is what we're watching. So
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting because she does make a point of even talking about that kind of live relationship with the audience, and kind of the way you just phrased it as being invited into a child's home and room. It's you really are talking to each other in real time. I mean, for those who haven't seen the movie yet or aren't familiar with some of her work, she kind of they talk about Mr. Rogers a bit, but she does seem like the precursor to Mr. Rogers. Like it is in that style. It is engaging. It is, encouraging confidence in children. And it's true, even just watching any of these shows kind of on demand, it's a different psychological relationship you have with the performer.
Yeah, and if you don't like the show, you just get a new show.
Right.
Like you
Right.
can do that back in the day. You're like, either you walk away or this is what you got.
I mean, it was definitely like the era of the latchkey kid where you need to be entertained for like several hours at a time. And, Lamb Chop and the whole show, the Sherry show was like very good at it was on the air for quite some time, and it was really like you showed in the doc, like it was on lunch boxes, on records, and in books, and it was kind of like all over the place, which was it was so crazy to see. And nowadays, I think you can definitely trace, whether it's from Sherry to Mr. Rogers and so on and so on. But now you have like Yo Gabba Gabba, and then there's other like puppet shows that are out there, Waffles and Mochi, all these good things. You can tell I have a couple of kids and I've seen them,
Young
but like
kids.
I can definitely see, the sort of the DNA in there but it's all very like specialized and it's kind of like all different platforms.
Yeah, I wanted to transition to a final question that we wanted to ask about, the enduring legacy of Shari and Lamb Chop. You mentioned that she was telling even some of the same style of jokes, 30 years later from the 60s to the 90s. That was the most remarkable part of this documentary to me was just how many decades we span and how long it's endured. And even now, you mentioned it before, I think before we started recording, but now her daughter has taken on the Lamb Chop mantle and performs as her. And I actually went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Speaking of, what we're talking about, I found some of the TikTok videos that her daughter is posting, in
No way.
character, and that she was telling, oh, this is like too much of an aside, but she was telling a great story about how she did the drunk lamb chop bit, and someone saw her doing it live and said, "Your mother would be so disappointed." And she said, "Well, my mother wrote this bit, so I don't think that's the case."
That's
Um,
awesome.
but I just wanted to ask you, after having, spent so much time watching this routine, what do you think about it? What do you think it is about ventriloquy and in this character that has kept it so enduring, so connected to audiences, and that hopefully will, allow it to persist, for the next generation of children?
I think going back to Lamb Chop and Mallory, like when Mallory performs live or when she appears at to promote the film, this like it's as if we were at one festival. When Lamb Chop's there, it's as if she's a rock star. People go absolutely crazy for Lamb Chop. So, I don't know. There's something about Lamb Chop. I think the one thing that people have even said is that they didn't realize Sherry was a ventriloquist. Like when they were, when you're watching her when you're a kid, you don't think of her you don't know she's not like
Her mouth
Right,
is
right.
completely closed.
ventriloquist.
It's
Like
really
like Lamb Chop, the characters are so magical. Like Lamb Chop is so real. You forget that she's Sherry. Even when we were working on the film, sometimes I would be like, well, that's Sherry. Like that's not Lamb Chop is not a separate, it's still Sherry.
totally.
Because yeah, so something about Lamb Chop just like I don't know if you've heard about the dog toys, but the dog toys, like the number one selling dog toy is a Lamb Chop.
Is
Huh.
that right?
It's crazy. It has like if you go on Amazon, it has like 50,000 reviews and it's just a Lamb Chop. So there's something magical about Lamb Chop, I think.
Across the species and generations, it's really
Right.
remarkable.
It sounded like with her husband that like even the magic of Sherry disappearing and the puppet taking like front stage, like he would sometimes talk to I think maybe one of the bears, is that right? And
Mhm.
and sort of like be able to like vent or talk about Sherry to this puppet. I think something I don't know what it is. It allows you to sort of feel less intimidated by the person or just more free. I'm not sure.
I think it's a couple things. Like one thing that we found when we were editing with my editor is that we found that Sherry does voice her opinions through her puppets. So
Hmm.
there's times that she couldn't say what she wanted to say, but she could say it through a puppet. And
Right.
also, Lamb Chop could say things, and who's going to get mad at Lamb Chop? I
Yeah.
guess that's the whole ventriloquy thing, right? Like the whatever people don't like the word dummy. I'm not sure what it is, but like
Right.
you can't get mad at that person. But I think you can't get mad at Lamb Chop either. And I think Sherry did use, she used the puppets to sometimes say things that she wouldn't normally say. But yeah, that was pretty wild interview. Like, well, we didn't interview her. We found that interview of her husband talking about that, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was remarkable. And, to all this effect, like there is a great quote in there that I wrote down where Sherry's talking about how her puppets were just an extension of herself. People would ask her, "Are you ever going to retire this character?" And she's like, "That would be retiring myself. Like this is who
Right.
I am. This is this is part of my voice." And I think she even says early on that this is kind of something we all do. She just, externalizes it, to a different degree. And I think that's part of what's so enduring, what's so kind of mimicable and just admirable about watching her express herself in ways that I think we all try to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, we all do have different parts of ourselves. And especially all performers have their characters too.
No question. I mean that evokes. I just saw the new Bob Dylan movie, that A Complete
Okay.
Unknown, with Timothy Chalamet, and I think there were similar scenes about kind of crafting that performance and who you have to be, as a performer, and I definitely echo that.
I know you can't choose your favorite puppet. That's obviously, or maybe it's not obviously Lamb Chop, but I'm assuming it might be Lamb Chop of the bunch. Is that safe to say?
There is one thing I regret is that I didn't put Captain Person in the film, and that was a kangaroo.
Uh-huh.
And I love this kangaroo, but somehow he didn't fit in. He never fit into the room. Like he was an old guy who was like made bad jokes. So I kind of loved him. But
Kind of sounds like me.
I loved him, but I love Lamb Chop. I just
Yeah,
there's no, I mean the other puppets are great, but I love Lamb Chop. And then Sherry
right.
had a puppet that I didn't like that nobody likes called Baby. I don't know if it's like a big baby. So,
Oh,
but
okay.
she always would try to get that puppet going, and nobody ever liked that puppet.
And you're not talking
Right.
about Dom DeLuise. You're talking about an
It was
actual
like a big
puppet.
baby puppet.
Oh,
It,
okay, gotcha.
it might be in the film in some B-roll, but it never made the film because it was
Right.
just an amazing puppet. But somehow Sherry kept trying to get that puppet out there, and,
Yeah.
and it never really hit.
Do you have a favorite era of Sherry's like performance repertoire? Like I think we start out in the 50s and she goes all the way until the like early 90s. But she spanned all genres. It seems like beyond puppetry, she also did jazz dance and some comedy routines and all sorts of other stuff. Is there a sort of a style of her performance stuff that resonated with you most?
Well, too, the dancing was pretty amazing. I didn't know that Sherry was such an amazing dancer, so that really rang through. And then I love the Playboy era,
Yeah.
like the Las
Yeah.
Vegas era, because that was so unexpected. Like I found something online that she had been in Playboy After Dark, and I was like, Sherry was in like so. I love
Right.
that lamb chop, like that adult lamb chop period
Yeah.
too. We also like did a catalog of Sherry's hairdos
Hmm.
like over
Yeah.
different periods of time. So my favorite hairdo was like her with a headband and like the flipped up hair. So that was my
Yeah.
favorite hair period.
I thought her like sort of when she was dancing with either Fred Astaire or with the other two
Oh,
showgirls, and they were
mm,
like doing like with that was just a master class in like puppetry, but also dancing and singing, and it was just so cool. Definitely worth checking out. Harry, do you have one to close us out? Do you have a favorite Sherry era, whether hair or performance?
Maybe it's all the same, but I loved seeing some of that later stuff. There's some great behind the scenes where she's become this kind of director creator, like everything is her vision. So I loved sequences of where she's like staging the children and she's like, "You were standing here, we need continuity of shot, we need this." And then all the way through her kind of, I think it's called Hello Goodbye, was her final, song performance when she had already kind of been,
Oh,
far along with the cancer. And I even just talking about it was emotional, but just
yeah,
hearing her kind of push her way through that, through the end. She makes a point throughout the whole movie that, she was always wanted to keep working and contributing and connecting with people. And I don't know about favorite, but it certainly is the one that left the longest impression on me after the movie.
yeah, absolutely. Lisa, thank you so much for being here on Jews on Film to discuss Sherry and Lamb Chop. Really appreciate it.
oh, thank you. I really appreciate how much you guys seem to have enjoyed the film. So it makes me happy. So thank you
Oh
very
yeah.
much.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, unlike the song, this is the podcast that actually ends. It doesn't go on and on, my friends. But everyone can go check out Sherry and Lamb Chop at the midday matinee on March 28th at 1 p.m. at the Strom Jewish Community Center as part of the 30th annual Seattle Jewish Film Festival. We'll put a link in our show notes where you can get where you can get tickets for that, and please do check it out. As a bonus question, is there something that you're working on now that you're excited about?
It'll probably be at the festival in 3 years. That's all I could
Okay.
say. Other unsung, amazing female of New York Jewish descent. So that's all I could say.
Okay.
And she's a
Right.
singer. That's
Harry? Is it Harry's mom? Is your mom a singer, Harry? Is she in New York?
Regretfully, I don't think so, but I
No,
will be
okay.
thinking about it and coming up with my guesses after we stop recording.
Awesome.
yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for listening to Jews on Film, and we'll talk to you later. Jews on Film is hosted and produced by Daniel Zana and Harry Ottensasser. Daniel and Harry edited this episode. Follow us on Instagram at Jews on Film and subscribe to our podcast to get new episodes. Thanks for listening.